It's Larry Sharpe here at FreedomFest yet again, having great conversations, talking about values and ethics and respect. And I'm very lucky today to have with me James Czerniawski, who is a commentator at Young Voices. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Larry. Thanks. How are you doing?
Doing good. Tell me something about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a commentator with Young Voices. A lot of the work that I do surrounds covering issues on technology and innovation, which is, I think, one of the most important areas when we're looking to the future in terms of how we shape society and how people are going to be impacted by the innovations of today. So it's a very exciting field, really.
I mean, how we communicate in general, right?
Yes, it's changed rapidly over the last 25, 28 years, and it's going to continue to do so over the future. So I'm very excited about the prospects for that.
That's great. Now, you're saying Young Voices.
Yeah.
Is it because the youth are adopting this more, or is that just something that's cool, like calling people young and stuff?
I hope so, but I would like to see that more kids, more people my age and younger are kind of lighting up to some of this kind of philosophy that we embrace. But I know that it certainly is not where the general person that's Gen Z certainly lines up. So I think that it's important that people my age step up and speak out on the issues that we care about. Otherwise, people just think that there's a one-size-fits-all kind of voice to how people look at these issues, and that's not even remotely the case.
I love what you're saying, right? You're saying that we want to speak out so we can persuade people, because we don't want a one-size-fits-all that says everyone must do X. And that's kind of what I want to talk about, so I'm glad you brought that up. A lot of people are going to lean left or right, or more progressive or more conservative. That's a common thing, and most people do. But I want to talk about not your values, but your ethics. When is it okay to use coercion? When is it okay to use persuasion? Is there an exception to use either of them? And that's what I'm talking about today. So you're perfectly saying, look, I want us to use our communications so we can persuade. Because if we don't, we're going to coerce.
Yeah.
What I would say is, I think the center of this is all of us want to be happy. Do you think that's true?
I think that people want to be happy, broadly speaking. I just think that how we view the process of getting to being happy is radically different depending on who you ask, right?
Right.
And that's what makes the conversation that much more important. Because once we're focusing on the details of the process of what can make us be happier and living in a more free and open society where everybody's benefiting, I think that that's where the fruitful conversation can happen, as opposed to the top-line rhetorical stuff that's not productive at all, really.
You're the opposite, so I don't like you.
Yeah, I think that that's one of the biggest problems right now that's plaguing our society.
Sure.
Here at FreedomFest, I was talking on a panel where that was one of the things I brought up, where I think it doesn't matter what your solution to getting happy is, if we do not see each other eye to eye and have that conversation, understand that we might have differences of opinion and be able to walk away okay with that.
Kind of have that human respect.
You have to be able to have that human respect, and I feel like we've legitimately lost that, especially in my generation and younger. It feels like we've increasingly upped the ante in terms of wanting to see divisive rhetoric, and I think that that's a shame, really, because I want to go and talk with people no matter what party, what alignment they have, because I want to be able to understand where they're coming from, so that way it makes me better when I want to talk about my issues that I care about.
Right. Makes sense. So, with that in mind, I think what is more universal, most people understand, is regardless of how you want to become happy, whatever your pathway is, or even if your pathway is wrong, but you just think it's right, whatever that pathway you're going down, if someone is going to harm you in some way, physically hurt you, punch you, something like that, you're going to be less happy, right?
Yes.
But a second piece, that is obvious for most, but as a second part, what if people are either to take or vandalize your property either through theft or through fraud? We don't almost realize that also was going to make you a whole lot less happy.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I think that people don't realize, they get so hung up in their personal property in terms of, if I punch you, that's a harm against you. And we certainly do not want to encourage that. We certainly don't want to see that. But there is also an extremely negative impact that comes from damaging somebody's property, a way that can help them be whole and live their best life.
Right.
So I think that we have to be cognizant of respecting people in every possible way as humanly possible, because if I am resorting to those kinds of things where I'm damaging your property or, harassing you at your home or something like that, I don't think that that's necessarily productive to the end conversation we want to see.
Absolutely. So I guess it's almost like you and I would agree with that, obviously, right? We're here at FreedomFest. We would agree with that.
Yeah.
But the question is, do you think that it's just us, or do you think that almost everybody is going to say, hey, look, I want to be happy, and if you're not taking my stuff, if you're not hurting me, I have a better chance of being happy? Is it that common sense or no?
So what I would say is I think that it is more common amongst people than we would lend credit to, because right now in this digital era, we've seen a megaphone be given to the loudest voices in the room on either side of the equation. And while they are there, and they are certainly a legitimate thing to think about, they are not representative of the large majority of the population, who I do think tend to have that core ethos of do what you got to do, live your best life, but like try not to go and step on me too hard here.
Right. But then even that person who is the firebrand,
yeah.
the firebrand left or the firebrand right,
yeah.
isn't that person in their own way trying to be happy?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, and there's a place, and I think that I appreciate what they're doing to a degree, insofar as that you need people to be passionate about what they care about. Otherwise, if everyone's just apathetic, then we don't actually know what makes you happy or how to best serve you if you're thinking about this as a politician or even as a person who wants to advance society in some way through business. If we don't know how you feel, then it kind of makes it hard to serve you and make you happier, right? So I think that there's a place for them. I just think that in terms of what their end goals have been becoming increasingly aligned towards, that it makes it very difficult to actually help, In
fact, in one way, it might actually remove human respect.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Right.
Again, going back to the earlier point, if we can't see each other despite our differences as just being human and wanting to respect one another and being able to walk away understanding that we have that difference of opinion and still be friendly, it doesn't matter. Like, we are not going to be able to get around that.
I feel like it's almost universal to say the philosophy of human respect, that don't take people's stuff, don't harm them, is going to create more happiness, more harmony, and more prosperity. I feel like that's an actual universal principle.
I think it is, and I think that that's why you saw it embedded here in the United States in terms of how we formed our institutions. It was with that core ethos in mind. If you're able to leave people alone to a large degree and respect and protect their property rights in all forms, then it leads to a society where we can, on average, at least strive to be happier than most other places. And despite all the problems that we have here in this country, you still see thousands of people every single day trying to bang down the door to get in here for that very reason. It is a hell of a lot better than the other alternatives out there.
Okay, so are there exceptions? For example, let's say what's a common, someone who maybe is more conservative might think, hey, I want better society. I want people to be happier overall for the greater good. So we should pass a law or force people, and we should decide who should and shouldn't get married. These people should get married, these people can't, these can, these cannot. We should, because that's good for society, right? We want to make a better society. We believe that's best for society, so we want to pass that law or create that rule to make that happen. Is that kind of thing an exception?
I mean, I don't personally think so, only because I think that marriage is really, I don't like the notion of having to license it from the state to begin with. There's a tax incentive that they're trying to create there towards creating family, which I understand and can certainly respect the desire for that, but I don't think that you should be trying to coerce people through hard law approaches to form societies that you think are best prescribed. I think that if you can do that. But when
that person is doing it, right?
Yeah.
The individual who's supporting it or who's presenting it, they're not trying to hurt people, right?
No.
They, in their mind, they're making things better.
Yeah.
It's the greater good. There's no exception for that?
I don't think so, only because I think that, again, if we're talking about doing this legislatively, I think you always have to think about when the shoe's on the other foot, because what your version of what that society should look like is in power. Sure, maybe that is the best thing, that's great, but it can easily be weaponized by somebody who doesn't have the same worldview as you do to flip it on its head the next day. And
but if you put that law in, theoretically, who am I harming? Right? I'm not physically beating somebody up, right? I'm not hurting you physically. How is that how is the government harming?
Well, I would say that it could potentially have a chilling effect on the ability of people to want to express themselves. So certainly with the issue like gay marriage, that was certainly an issue that I think people were able to feel, even though they loved one another and even within their friend circles, that there was that ability to do that. You didn't get to see that on a more societal level because there were certain stereotypes or stigmas that were placed on it because of the way that we looked at the convention of marriage through the eyes of the law. And I think that that's a shame, right? I think that I want to be able to...
But there's no real harm, though.
I think it's a harm only insofar as that people are not in a position to be able to express themselves to the fullest degree.
But what about if you actually got married?
Yeah.
And the government said, okay, that's now illegal, so we're going to fine you or arrest you or something like that.
Well, then that is an actual harm in a different kind of capacity, right? If you're fining them, that's economic harm that you've imposed on somebody. If you're arresting someone, that's a coercive harm that you've put on somebody. You're denying them their ability to life and liberty and pursuit of happiness in many ways. And again, this is all based on the premise of they literally denied some kind of abject society's like standard of how they think things should run. And I don't think that necessarily should be punished, because again, what is their harm on society for existing in that kind of a relationship? I don't think that harm outweighs the potential harm of the state and what they can do.
So the harm that we talked about earlier is like someone punching you or someone taking your stuff.
Yeah.
We're now including government in this. We're saying government is just as coercive.
Oh yeah.
Just as violent.
Very much so.
Okay. But how about this now? I did Republicans, I'm do Democrats now. Democrats will say, wait a minute, that's lifestyle or social, they'll say that. But what I'm going to tell you about as a Democrat now is, this is life. This is life and death. Guns kill people. We should get rid of all of the guns because guns kill people. This isn't lifestyle, this is life and death. Is there an exception for something like that? Life and death. Is there an exception there?
No, I think there's an argument that can be made that the government has a responsibility to do some basic protections to ensure that people are protected from being exposed to inordinate amounts of violence. But I think that, at least with the issue of guns, that certainly is a lot more complicated of an issue than people realize, and that simply banning guns or simply doing these broad stroke things doesn't necessarily achieve that stated outcome. I think people ignore that there's a broad swath of folks that don't necessarily even respect the laws that are there, and that there are consequences and unintended consequences. And I also am a little bit inclined to agree with the notion that guns serve as a check on the government's ability to abuse its powers that it does have, because we do have that contract with the government to give them certain responsibilities. And if they do not have any respect for that constraint, what's our ability to hold them in check if we don't have that? A simple election doesn't necessarily guarantee that's what we're going to see happen here.
Let me walk down election. If you're saying that there's really no exception for something that's greater good, and there's really no exception for life and death, what about the idea that I voted for it?
Yeah.
Right? So there was an election. So look, I'm not coming to your house to take your guns, not me.
Yeah.
I voted. 51% said it's okay to take your guns. I'm not taking them. It's going to be the ATF or the IRS or the cop or the sheriff.
Yeah.
So I'm not really doing it, and we voted, so it's fair.
Yeah, but I also think that simple majoritarian rule isn't exactly the ideal state that you want to be in either. A 50+1 equation, that's why even in our legislative body, we don't necessarily vote on every single issue on a 50+1 margin. The Senate has that 60 vote threshold for a reason. I think that when we're thinking about systemic changes that are large in nature, especially with something like guns, it makes it that much more important that we respect minority rights.
Let's say 60% vote. We can take your guns. Does that make it okay? Because, look, I'm not doing it, and we voted on it. Does that make it okay?
No, I don't necessarily think it's okay. I think that you still have to have some basic respect for the underlying rules that govern how our society is structured. We did have a Second Amendment put into the Constitution for a reason. Our founders thought that, again, you needed some kind of check on abject tyranny from the government to hold them accountable for when they are not respecting
But what if
things.
I could show you data that shows, see, people die, right? Here's the data, people die. And because people are dying, it's government's job to try to protect the people.
Yeah.
So if 60% vote for it, take all the guns.
Yeah, I think that the problem with data, at least from my experience, is that you can cut it any way you want.
Yes, absolutely.
There's a lot of ways to go and explain deaths and gun violence, and there are numerous things that go and lead to the events that unfold. And I think that it is foolhardy to suggest that it's a causal relationship in any situation. I think that you need to have a hybrid approach to dealing with an issue, even like guns. It's not just simply banning guns. It's not just simply placing heavy restrictions on gun violence. And also you have to think about the restrictions that are put in place. So like my home state of New York recently went and redid their law. And
I'm aware of that.
Yeah, right? So their new criterion is that they want you to actually turn over all your social media profile presences so that they can go and look at you for moral character.
The Supreme Court in theory made it easier to get a gun. And New York State said, no. Let me show you how this works.
Yeah.
And they made it harder.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, but even there, that raises some serious questions, right? The government's going to compel you to turn over your expression and use that as a criterion to determine whether or not you can own a gun. Like that's part of the rules that are being put in place in the name of trying to protect people. But in the process of trying to protect people, we're also harming them in other pretty substantive ways. If we're allowing the government to have the ability to press the yes or no button based off of how I choose to express myself in any medium whatsoever, that feels like a very dangerous proposition to hold.
So you're saying that even in the case of greater good, even in the case of life and death, government still has to, or should at least, I should say has to, should be measuring anything it does against the principle of human respect, regardless.
Yes, I think that is the place that we should look for ideally, and I think that when the government's looking to intervene in any kind of manner, it should be as narrowly tailored as humanly possible to mitigate against those kinds of risks, because the harm to people is very real.
Yes.
And when we're talking about things done on the federal level, even more so, if they did something wrong or bad in a piece of legislation, it's going to take us decades to fix it, right?
Absolutely.
So the impact there is felt.
Harm.
Yes, exactly. And it'll take years to go through the courts. It'll take years to get through Congress if we're going to go the legislative path. So we have to be very careful when we're talking about pushing something across all people across the entire country who have a wide swath of views on these issues.
Right. So no matter what, we want to make sure, to the best of our ability, that the less coercion we're doing, government or individual, the less we're looking at human respect, the more pain we're putting on our population.
Absolutely.
Right? The principle of human respect is going to make us happier, more harmonious, and more prosperous.
Yes.
I love that. I think it's great. I wish government would spend more time doing that, don't you?
I wish so, and I wish that people would do that too. Right now, I think we're in a culture where everybody's boiling up many issues that we're seeing right now to the federal level and expecting the federal government to take that action, and I think that's the wrong way of looking at it. A lot of the things that have the most significant impact on our daily lives actually happens right at the local level, in our state houses, and I think that I would love to see people use and really embrace the laboratories of democracy approach to get changes into their states that they want to see happen.
I would argue even lower.
Yeah.
Me and you.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
her, right? Anybody out here who, if I sit here and I go, let me tell you about guns, whatever side I take, someone's going to now label me and not listen to me.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about marriage equality. Someone's going to label me and say that's who you are and not talk to me.
Yeah.
But if we focus first on just respecting each other, just human respect first, now you might hear me.
Absolutely. And
now you might hear what I have to say.
Absolutely. I think that's why I like to try to stray away from attaching to any kind of label in terms of political affiliation, because I don't want to be labeled into a camp of thought on all these issues, when the reality is that you can ask me a question on one issue and I have a radically different thought than I might have on another issue.
Sure.
And one might come off as conservative, one might come off as liberal, one might come off as anarcho-capitalist. It depends, really,
Sure. So you're saying that your value system could change, but no matter what, your ethics is going to say that no matter what, I don't want coercion. I want to persuade you. I don't want to coercion.
Yeah, I think the best process in general, especially because I don't want to see the state getting involved as often as possible, is to have a solution where we have people engaging on a community level and building a community respect with one another, so that we really, connect with one another in a way that I think that we've lost in recent years.
I love that. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for talking.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
Have a good one.
You too.